My wife said, "If you don't like my friend's rude jokes, you can just pay and leave." I said, "Thanks for the option." Then I stood up, took my car keys, and walked out of the restaurant. She thought I was joking until her friends' laughter died when they realized I had just paid for my meal only. You know how they say you can pinpoint the exact moment your life changes forever? Yeah, well, mine happened over a damn Caesar salad and some overpriced cocktails at Romano's Steakhouse on 5th Street. The name's Lucas Harlow. I'm 29, and I work with my hands for a living. Something that apparently makes me fair game for every joke in the book. According to my wife's crew, that Tuesday night was supposed to be special. Marina had just scored a promotion to senior marketing manager at her firm, and honestly, I was proud as hell. She'd been busting her ass for months, pulling late nights, kissing up to the right people, doing all that corporate ladder climbing stuff that frankly makes my head spin. But hey, she wanted it. She got it. And I figured that deserved a celebration. So I made reservations at Romano's. Not exactly cheap, but Marina's always had expensive taste, and I wasn't about to throw her a party at Applebee's. I picked up the tab for the whole crew without even thinking twice about it. Me, Marina, and her 3 best friends, Celeste, Tara, and Harley. These women had been tight since college, and Marina always made it clear they came as a package deal. You marry Marina, you get the whole sorority sister experience, whether you like it or not. And brother, let me tell you, I was starting to really not like it. We weren't even 10 minutes into the appetizers. I'm talking the spinach and artichoke dip hadn't even made it around the table yet when Celeste decided to open her mouth. She's got this way of smiling that never reaches her eyes, you know. Like she's always got some inside joke going that you're not part of. "Still working with wires, Lucas," she said, twirling her fork around like she was conducting an orchestra. Must be nice having such a basic job. The word basic hung in the air like a fart in church. Real classy, right? I mean, I'm a licensed electrician. I've got my own truck, steady clients, and I make decent money keeping the lights on in this city. But apparently that doesn't measure up to whatever corporate BS these women think passes for real work. Tara jumped right in because God forbid Celeste have all the fun. "Oh, and what about all that junk you collect in your garage? Lucas, how many broken motorcycles do you need?" She laughed like she'd just told the funniest joke since Dave Chappelle. The thing is, those aren't broken motorcycles. They're restoration projects. Classic bikes that I'm bringing back to life because I actually give a damn about craftsmanship and history. But try explaining that to someone who thinks anything older than last year's iPhone is garbage. I looked over at Marina, waiting for her to say something. Anything. Maybe a, "Hey, that's my husband you're talking about," or even just a change of subject. Instead, she's sitting there with this little smile on her face, sipping her wine like she's watching a mildly amusing sitcom. Not defending me, not uncomfortable, just entertained. That's when Harley decided to really go for the throat. Harley's the worst of the bunch. She's got this fake sweet voice that she uses right before she says something absolutely vicious. "You know, Marina," she said, leaning in like she was sharing some big secret. "You really could do better. Remember Jasper from your leadership seminar?" Now that guy had potential. Jasper, some slick-talking finance bro who apparently made quite an impression during Marina's company retreat last month. Marina had mentioned him a few times, how smart he was, how successful, how he drove a Tesla and lived in one of those fancy downtown lofts. Real winner, I'm sure. The table got quiet for about 2 seconds, and I'm thinking maybe Marina's finally going to stand up for her husband. Maybe she's going to tell her friends to back off and show some respect. Instead, she shrugs, and says, "If you don't like my friend's jokes, Lucas, you can just pay and leave." Just like that. 26 years old when we met, 31 now, 5 years of marriage, and that's what I get. Not these are just jokes. Not they don't mean anything by it. But pay and leave like I'm some kind of servant who's overstayed his welcome at the big kids' table. You know what's funny? In that moment, everything became crystal clear. All those little comments over the years, all those times Marina's friends would forget to include me in group plans, all those conversations that would stop when I walked into a room. It all made sense. I wasn't Marina's husband to these people. I was Marina's charity case, her little blue-collar project, something she kept around for reasons even she probably couldn't explain anymore. The silence stretched out, like a bad song on the radio. Celeste was smirking behind her martini glass. Tara was checking her phone like nothing had happened. Harley was looking at me with this expectant expression, like she was waiting for me to apologize or beg or make some kind of scene that would give them even more material to laugh about later. But you know what? I didn't give them the satisfaction. I stood up calmly, quietly, like I was just excusing myself to use the bathroom. Reached into my back pocket and pulled out my wallet, the old leather one my dad gave me when I graduated trade school. Counted out exactly $62. Enough to cover my meal, my drinks, and a decent tip for our server, who didn't deserve to get stiff just because my wife's friends are garbage human beings. I placed the money on the table right next to my barely touched plate. "This covers mine," I said, and my voice was steady as a rock. Marina rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic, muttered something under her breath about me embarrassing her. But I didn't respond. Didn't argue, didn't explain, didn't give them the big emotional breakdown they were probably hoping for. I just walked out, grabbed my truck keys from my pocket, and headed for the parking lot, leaving behind the sound of their shocked whispers and Marina's increasingly frantic voice calling my name. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. Sitting in my truck in that parking lot, staring at the steering wheel and listening to the engine tick as it cooled down, I tried to figure out how the hell I'd become the punchline in my own marriage. When did loving someone turn into being their personal ATM and punching bag? When did for better or worse start meaning pay up and shut up? That's when my phone started buzzing. My phone was lighting up like a damn Christmas tree. But I wasn't ready to deal with that circus just yet. First, I needed to get my head straight and then figure out what the hell just happened back there. The parking lot at Romanos was one of those fancy brick pave jobs with little decorative lights strung between the trees. Real upscale stuff that probably cost more to install than most people make in a month. Kind of fitting, really, since everything about tonight had been about appearances and keeping up with people who think money makes them better than everyone else. I sat there in my F-150, the same truck I've been driving for 6 years now. It's got some dings and scratches, sure, but it runs like a dream and it's paid for. Something I used to think mattered. Marina always made little comments about it, especially when we'd pull up next to her friends' fancy cars. "Maybe it's time for an upgrade, honey," she'd say, like my truck was somehow embarrassing her just by existing. But you know what? This truck has hauled materials for every job I've ever done, helped 3 different neighbors move, and never once left me stranded on the side of the road. That's more than I can say for a lot of people in my life, apparently. The steering wheel was cold under my hands, and I could see my breath fogging up the windshield a little. October in the city always hits different. One day you're in a t-shirt, the next you need a jacket. Kind of like how life can change on you without warning. This morning, I woke up thinking I was married to someone who respected me. Tonight, I'm sitting in a parking lot, wondering when I became such a joke to the woman who's supposed to love me. My phone buzzed again, and this time I couldn't ignore it. The screen showed Marina's name with one of those couple photos we took last Christmas. Both of us smiling, her arm around my shoulders, looking happy as hell. Funny how pictures can lie, right? I swiped to see the message. "Lucas, come back and pay." Not come back and talk. Not I'm sorry about what happened. Just come back and pay like I'm some kind of walking ATM who got out of line. The next text came about 30 seconds later. This isn't funny anymore. Funny, lady, I wasn't trying to be funny. I was trying to maintain whatever dignity I had left after getting roasted by your mean girl squad for the better part of an hour. There's nothing funny about watching your wife sit there like a statue while her friends tear you apart for sport. Then came the third one. And this is where you could really hear the panic creeping in. You're really going to leave us like this? Leave them like what exactly? With a bill for overpriced steaks and cocktails with the natural consequences of their own nastiness? Yeah, Marina, I guess I am. I stared at those messages for a long time, watching the little dots appear and disappear as she typed and deleted. Typed and deleted. Part of me, the part that had been trained over 5 years of marriage to be the peacekeeper, the apologizer, the guy who always smoothed things over, wanted to go back in there, wanted to slap down my credit card and pretend like nothing happened because that's what I always did. That's what good husbands do, right? They take care of things. They don't make scenes. They certainly don't abandon their wives with a dinner bill. But sitting there in the quiet of my truck, with the muffled sounds of traffic and the distant laughter from the restaurant's patio, something felt different. Something had shifted inside me when Marina told me to pay and leave, and I couldn't shake it loose. It was like a switch had been flipped, or maybe a door had been opened that I couldn't close again. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what I should do or what was expected of me. I was thinking about what I wanted to do, and what I wanted was to drive away. So I did. I turned the key, listened to my reliable old truck rumble to life, and I drove slowly, carefully, like I was carrying something fragile that might break if I went too fast. Maybe I was. Maybe what I was carrying was the last little bit of whatever had been holding my marriage together, and I didn't want it to shatter completely until I had time to figure out what that meant. The drive-through downtown was peaceful in a way I hadn't experienced in months. No Marina chattering about office drama or asking me to stop somewhere so she could pick up something she forgot. No radio playing whatever pop music she insisted on. No rush to get anywhere or be anyone other than exactly who I was. Just me, my truck, and the city lights sliding by like a movie I was watching instead of living in. I found myself taking the long way, winding through neighborhoods I used to know better before I got married and started spending all my free time at Marina's apartment. Then, our apartment surrounded by her friends and her plans and her version of what our life should look like. These streets felt familiar in a way that surprised me, like running into an old friend you forgot you missed. My phone kept buzzing, but I didn't look. Whatever Marina had to say could wait until I figured out what I had to say back. Because for the first time in a long time, I felt like I might actually have something to say that mattered. Something that was mine instead of just a reaction to whatever drama was swirling around me. The thing is, when you finally stop running towards something, you start to notice what you've been running from. And brother, I was just starting to understand how far and how fast I've been running for myself. Marcus, who has been my best friend since we were both apprentices at Henderson Electric 7 years ago. The guy's got this sixth sense about people. He can spot Bustot from a mile away, and he's never been afraid to call it out. So, when I showed up at his apartment door at 9:30 on a Tuesday night, probably looking like I'd been hit by a truck, he took one look at my face and said, "Took you long enough. No questions, no drama. Just stepped aside and let me in like he'd been expecting me for months." That's Marcus for you. Straight shooter who doesn't waste time on pleasantries when there's real stuff to deal with. His place is this decent one-bedroom in Riverside. Nothing fancy, but clean and comfortable. The kind of place where you can actually relax instead of worrying about putting a water ring on some expensive coffee table or messing up throw pillows that cost more than most people's car payments. "Sit," he said, pointing to his beat-up leather couch, the same one he'd had since college, worn soft in all the right places. "I'll make coffee." Marcus always makes coffee when life gets heavy. Says it's better than alcohol because you can think clearer. And right then, I needed all the clear thinking I could get. While he was banging around in the kitchen, I finally looked at my phone. 12 missed calls from Marina. 12 plus 3 voicemails that I wasn't ready to listen to yet. And about 15 text messages that got progressively more frantic as the night went on. Where are you? This is ridiculous. Call me back right now. Real mature stuff that really made me want to rush home and apologize for having the audacity to leave after being told to leave. Marcus came back with 2 steaming mugs of black coffee, none of that fancy creamer stuff Marina always insisted on, and settled into his old recliner. All right, he said. Lay it on me. What finally did it? Not what happened or are you okay? But what finally did it? Like I said, the guy's got a 6th sense. So I told them everything. The dinner, the jokes, Marina just sitting there like she was watching Netflix instead of her husband getting roasted by her mean girl squad. How they mocked my job, my hobbies, my whole damn existence like I was some kind of charity case. And how Marina, my wife, the woman who's supposed to have my back, told me to pay and leave when I finally looked like I might actually stand up for myself. Marcus listened without interrupting, occasionally shaking his head or making one of those disgusted sounds you make when you hear something that really pisses you off. When I got to the part about Marina's reaction, he actually laughed. Not a happy laugh, but one of those bitter laughs you get when something terrible makes perfect sense. Remember when they called your sister's wedding cute for a discount event? He said when I finished. I was standing right there, man. Your sister looked beautiful. The ceremony was perfect. And those spent the whole reception making jokes about the venue and the food. Or how about your dad's birthday toast last year? They laughed at his accent like he was some kind of comedy act, instead of a man who worked his ass off to give his family a better life. The thing is, I did remember. I remembered all of it. But I'd spent so much time making excuses and telling myself it wasn't that bad that I'd almost convinced myself it was normal. Friends tease each other, right? That's just how women are with each other, right? Except they weren't teasing me like a friend. They were tearing me down like I was their entertainment. Marina never said anything. I told Marcus, and even saying it out loud made me feel pathetic. She just lets it happen, brother, Marcus said, leaning forward in his chair. She doesn't just let it happen. She encourages it. You think they'd keep pulling this crap if she shut it down even once. These women follow her lead. And her lead is that you're fair game. While we were talking, my phone kept lighting up like a damn disco ball. More calls, more texts, and now Marina's friends were getting in on the action too. Celeste sent me some passive-aggressive message about communication and working things out. Tara forwarded me some article about men and emotional intelligence that I definitely didn't ask for. But the real winner was Harley. This chick actually sent me a Venmo request for $150 for emotional distress. I showed Marcus the phone and he just about spit out his coffee. Emotional distress? Are you kidding me? She caused you emotional distress, and now she wants you to pay her for it. That's like punching someone in the face and then charging them for hurting your knuckles. That's when I made the decision that probably should have been made months ago. I blocked all of them. Marina, Celeste, Tara, Harley, the whole toxic crew got cut off with a few quick taps on my phone screen. The sudden quiet was almost shocking. Like when you don't realize how loud the TV is until someone turns it off. Good, Marcus said when I told him what I'd done. Those people are poison, man. They've been slowly killing your confidence for years, and Marina's been holding the door open for them. Marcus let me crash on his couch that night, threw me a pillow and one of his old blankets without making it weird or asking how long I might need to stay. Just took care of his friend, because that's what real friends do. As I lay there in the dark, listening to the distant sounds of the city through his windows, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. No Marina tossing and turning next to me, muttering about work stress. No anxiety about what tomorrow's drama might bring. Just quiet and space to think. And the knowledge that at least one person in my life actually gave a damn about me as a human being instead of a walking wallet. I woke up the next morning feeling like I'd been hit by a freight train, but not in the way you'd expect. My back was stiff from sleeping on Marcus's couch. Sure, but mentally, I felt clearer than I had in months. There's something about cutting toxic people out of your life that's like finally getting a good night's sleep after weeks of insomnia. You don't realize how exhausted you were until the weight lifts off your shoulders. Marcus had already left for work by the time I rolled out of bed around 7, which was typical for him. The guy's always been an early bird, probably inherited it from his dad, who ran a small construction company before retiring. He'd left a note on the kitchen counter in his chicken scratch handwriting. "Coffee is ready. Stay as long as you need. Keys under the mat if you go out. Don't do anything stupid. Classic Marcus. Practical help with a side of brotherly advice." I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when my phone rang. Unknown number, which immediately put me on edge because I'd blocked everyone from last night's disaster. But curiosity got the better of me, and I picked up. "Lucas, can we talk?" Marina's voice hit me like a slap in the face. She was calling from her office line, probably because she figured out I'd blocked her personal number. Smart move, actually. I had to give her credit for that level of determination. "Sure," I said, settling back into Marcus's kitchen chair. "We're talking." There was this pause, like she was expecting me to say more or maybe apologize right off the bat. When I didn't feel the silence, she cleared her throat and launched into what sounded like a speech she'd been practicing. "Lucas, I think we need to sit down and discuss what happened last night, like adults. Can you please come home so we can work this out?" Home? Funny how that word didn't carry the same weight it used to. "I'm good where I am," I told her. "If you want to talk, we can talk right now." Another pause, and I could practically hear her grinding her teeth. Marina hates it when things don't go according to her script. And clearly, I wasn't reading from the right page. "This is ridiculous, Lucas. You're being childish and oversensitive. Do you have any idea how embarrassed I was last night?" Embarrassed? She was embarrassed. Not sorry, not regretful, not concerned about how I felt. Embarrassed. Like my walking out was somehow worse than her sitting there like a mannequin while her friends used me for target practice. "How embarrassed you were," I repeated. And I could hear my voice getting that edge it gets when I'm trying real hard not to lose my on the being. "Marina, your friend spent an hour tearing me apart and you told me to pay and leave. What exactly did you expect me to do?" "I expected you to be an adult about it." She snapped. And there was that tone, the one she uses when she thinks she's winning an argument by getting louder. They were just joking around. "Lucas, you know how they are. But you turned it into this huge dramatic scene and humiliated me in front of my friends. Just joking around, right? Because nothing says friendly banter like suggesting your friend's husband isn't good enough for her and bringing up other men she should be dating instead. I didn't make a scene, Marina. I paid for my meal and left quietly. You told me to leave, so I followed directions. You left me with a $400 bill, Lucas. And there it was. The real issue. Not that I'd been disrespected. Not that our marriage was apparently a running joke to her social circle. But that she got stuck paying for dinner. How was I supposed to explain that to my friends? "I paid for mine," I said. And I kept my voice steady, even though I was seeing red. "You let them insult me while you smiled and drank wine. I'm not paying to be disrespected in public, Marina. That's not how this works." The silence stretched out for so long, I thought she might have hung up. Then she came back with this voice I'd never heard before. Cold, calculating, like she was talking to a stranger instead of her husband. "You're really going to destroy our marriage over this? Over some harmless jokes? Harmless jokes. 5 years of marriage, and she still didn't get it. Still didn't understand that watching your spouse let other people tear you down isn't something you just laugh off and forget about. I'm not destroying anything, Marina. I'm just not participating in my own humiliation anymore. That's when she really lost it. Started yelling about how I was being dramatic, how I was throwing away everything we'd built together, how I was embarrassing her at work by not coming home. The works. I let her vent for about 2 minutes. Then I hung up, just pressed the end call button, and went back to my coffee. My phone started ringing again immediately. Different unknown number this time. I didn't answer. Then another call. Then another. She was trying every office line she could think of, probably driving her coworkers crazy with her drama. I turned the phone to silent and tried to enjoy the quiet, but then something weird happened. Around noon, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Good for you, man. I've heard what they've said about you. They're scheming something. Stay sharp. It was signed with just the letter O. Omar had to be Omar. Harley's boyfriend. I'd met him a few times at group hangouts. Seemed like a decent enough guy, but always looked uncomfortable around Marina's crew. Kind of like how I probably looked, come to think of it. 2 guys dating women who treated us like accessories instead of partners. The fact that he was reaching out, warning me about some kind of scheme, made my stomach drop. What the hell were they planning now? Omar's warning text kept bouncing around in my head like a pinball. So I decided to swing by the apartment while Marina was at work to grab more of my stuff. Better to find out what kind of scheme they were cooking up before it bit me in the ass. Plus, I needed clothes that didn't smell like Marcus's fabric softener and my good work boots, which I'd stupidly left behind in my rush to get out of there. The first red flag hit me before I even got to the front door. There was a bright yellow notice taped to the wood. One of those official-looking things that makes your stomach drop even before you read it. Noise complaint. Violation of lease terms in big bold letters across the top. Apparently, the girls' night Marina and her crew had thrown after I left had gotten loud enough for the neighbors to call in a complaint to building management. Real classy. I used my key to let myself in, and Jesus Christ. The place looked like a tornado had blown through it. Wine bottles everywhere, empty ones rolling around on the hardwood floor. One of them with a dark red stain spreading out from where it had obviously been knocked over and never cleaned up. Takeout containers from at least 3 different restaurants were scattered across the kitchen counter, some still half full and starting to smell funky. There were clothes draped over furniture like they've been playing some kind of weird dress-up game, and the whole place rire of wine and whatever expensive perfume Harley always bathes herself in. But the real gut punch came when I walked into the spare room where I keep my tools. The room was practically empty. My toolbox, the big red Craftsman chest that took me 3 years to fill with quality equipment, had been picked apart like vultures had been added. My cordless drill set gone. My multimeter that cost me $400, gone. The wire strippers, electrical tape, circuit testers, outlet testers, basically everything that wasn't nailed down or too heavy to carry. $9,000 worth of professional equipment that I'd built up over 7 years in the trade just vanished. I stood there staring at the empty shelves, feeling like someone had punched me in the gut and then kicked me while I was down. These weren't just tools, they were my livelihood. Every electrician knows that your tools are sacred, man. You don't mess with another man's tools, period. It's like stealing a chef's knives or a mechanic's wrenches. Without my equipment, I couldn't work, couldn't make money, couldn't take care of myself. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures of the empty room. Evidence. I was going to need evidence for what was coming next. But first, I had to check on my bike. The garage was accessed through a door in the kitchen, and my heart was already racing as I turned the handle. Please be there. Please be there, I kept thinking. But of course, life had other plans. The spot where my 1978 Kawasaki KZ1000 had been sitting was empty except for a small oil stain on the concrete floor. 3 years of restoration work. Every weekend spent carefully rebuilding that beautiful machine from the ground up, and it was just gone. I ran back upstairs and fired up my laptop, my fingers flying over the keyboard as I searched Craigslist. It didn't take long to find it. There was my bike listed under motorcycles for sale with the headline, Mechanic Special Needs Work, $2,000 OBO. The photos were terrible, obviously taken in a hurry, but it was definitely my Kawasaki. My restoration project that was worth at least $8,000 in its current condition being sold for peanuts by someone who didn't know the first thing about classic motorcycles. The listing was posted under Marina's email address, not even trying to hide it. My own wife was selling my stuff online like I was dead or something. The description was insulting too. Selling for my ex-husband who left a bunch of junk behind. Bike runs but needs lots of work. Cash only, no lowballers. Ex-husband junk. I wasn't even officially her ex-husband yet. And she was already rewriting history to make me sound like some deadbeat who'd abandoned his responsibilities and calling my pride and joy junk. That hurt worse than everything else combined. I screenshot everything. The listing, the photos, the description, the timestamp showing when it was posted. Then I started digging through Facebook Marketplace and found 3 of my most expensive tools already sold. My pneumatic wire puller that cost me $200, gone to some contractor in Queens for $300. My oscilloscope sold for a fraction of what it was worth to some college kid who probably didn't even know what it was for. That's when I called the cops. Sat right there in my destroyed apartment, surrounded by the evidence of what could only be described as theft, and dialed 911. The dispatcher was professional, but not exactly encouraging. "Sir, if you have proof of ownership and can document the theft, you can file a report," she told me. "But since you're married and living together, it gets complicated. You'll need receipts, photographs, serial numbers, basically everything you can get to prove these items belong to you specifically." Complicated, right? Because apparently being married gives someone the right to steal your stuff and sell it online. But I had what I needed. Receipts going back years for every major tool purchase. Photos of my bike in various stages of restoration, even the original title and registration. I'd always been careful about that stuff, partly because good tools are expensive, and partly because my dad always taught me to keep records of important purchases. I spent the next 2 hours building my case, printing out screenshots, organizing receipts, making lists with serial numbers and purchase dates. The cop who showed up to take my statement was this older guy, probably close to retirement, who looked around the trash department and shook his head like he'd seen this kind of thing before. Domestic situations are always messy, he told me while writing down information in his little notebook. But theft is theft, regardless of who's doing it. You've got good documentation here. I'd recommend getting your remaining properties secured somewhere safe before anything else goes missing. Good advice. I loaded everything I could fit into my truck. Clothes, important papers, the few tools that were too worthless for Marina's friends to bother stealing, and my collection of motorcycle magazines that had somehow survived the purge. It was depressing how little of my own life fit into the back of my pickup. But at least I was getting it out before Marina could have another girls' night and decide to sell off whatever was left. As I was carrying the last box down to my truck, I noticed Mrs. Chun from 4B watching me through her peephole. She was probably wondering what all the drama was about, especially after last night's noise complaint. I gave her a little wave, and she actually opened her door. "You okay, Lucas?" she asked in her sweet grandmother voice. Mrs. Chun had always been nice to me, usually asked about my work and complimented my truck when she saw me in the parking lot. Very loud last night. Police came twice. Twice. Marina's celebration had been so out of control that the cops had to come back. And here I'd been thinking it was just a noise complaint. "I'm moving out, Mrs. Chun," I told her. "Sorry about all the trouble." She shook her head and made that skin sound older ladies make when they disapprove of something. "That wife of yours, she brings wrong kind of friends. Always loud, always rude in hallway. You deserve better, Lucas." Even the neighbors could see what I'd been blind to for years. Marina's crew wasn't just toxic to me. They were toxic to everyone around them. Mrs. Chun gave me her phone number and told me to call if I needed someone to vouch for what kind of tenant I'd been. "Good man. Like you shouldn't have to deal with this nonsense," she said, driving away from that apartment for what I hoped would be the last time. I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief? Yeah, I was pissed about my tools and my bike. And yeah, this whole situation was going to be a nightmare to sort out legally. But for the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells or wondering what mood Marina would be in when I got home. I wasn't planning my evening around her friend's drama or her work stress. I was barely back at Marcus's place, still trying to process the whole theft situation when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Patel Property Management, and my stomach immediately dropped. Mr. Patel was our landlord, a decent guy who'd always been fair with us. But landlords don't usually call just to chat. This was going to be about that noise complaint notice I'd seen taped to the door. "Lucas, my friend." Mr. Patel's voice carried that patient tone he used when he was trying to be diplomatic about bad news. "I hope you are well. I need to speak with you about the apartment." "Sure thing, Mr. Patel. What's going on?" I already knew, but sometimes you have to let people tell their story their own way. "Well, there was quite a disturbance last night. Multiple noise complaints from other tenants, and the police were called twice. This morning, Marina came to my office and told me that you have moved out permanently, and she wants your name removed from the lease." There it was. Marina was trying to erase me from the apartment the same way she was trying to erase me from her life. Problem was, my name was on that lease just as much as hers, and I'd been the one making sure the rent got paid on time every month for the past 2 years. "Mr. Patel, I haven't moved out permanently. I'm temporarily staying elsewhere due to marital issues. But I still live there, and I'm still responsible for the lease." He was quiet for a moment, and I could hear him shuffling papers on his desk. "Marina seemed very certain that you were no longer interested in the apartment. She said you had abandoned your responsibilities." "Abandoned my responsibilities?" "Right. The woman who just sold $9,000 worth of my tools without permission was lecturing people about abandoned responsibilities." "Mr. Patel, I was there this afternoon collecting my belongings. I saw the noise complaint notice. What exactly happened last night? Multiple tenants called building management about loud music, yelling, and what sounded like furniture being moved around at all hours. Mrs. Chun in 4B said there was vomit in the hallway this morning. The police report mentions possible property damage and public intoxication." His voice got more serious. "Lucas, in 15 years of property management, I have never had such complaints about you. You have always been quiet, respectful, prompt with rent. This is very concerning." That hit me right in the gut. Here was a guy who'd known me as a tenant for 2 years, who'd seen me help elderly neighbors with their groceries, and never once complained about anything. And now he was having to deal with police reports and property damage because of Marina's friends. "Mr. Patel, I left that dinner around 8:30 last night and went straight to my friend's place. I wasn't involved in whatever happened after that." I see more paper shuffling. "Marina also mentioned something about unpaid bills and financial disputes. She seemed to think you were no longer capable of meeting your obligations." Unpaid bills? This was rich coming from the woman who'd maxed out 2 credit cards on clothes and spa treatments in the past 6 months. "Sir, I've never been late with rent or utilities. My half has always been paid on time, and I have bank records to prove it. If there are unpaid bills, they're not mine. Mr. Patel was quiet for a long moment, and I could practically hear him thinking. Finally, he spoke up. "Lucas, you have always been a good tenant. Honest, responsible, no trouble. If you want to take over the lease entirely, I am willing to work with you. The apartment needs some repairs after last night anyway. But I will need Marina's agreement to remove her from the lease, or we will have to terminate it for both of you and start fresh." That got my attention. Taking over the lease meant Marina would have to find somewhere else to live. And given her spending habits and the fact that most of her income went to designer clothes and expensive dinners, I wasn't sure she could afford a place on her own. "What kind of repairs are we talking about, Mr. Patel?" "Red wine stains on the hardwood floors that may require refinishing. Damage to the bathroom door that looks like someone kicked it. Broken glass that was apparently swept under the refrigerator rather than properly cleaned up. And the entire apartment needs professional cleaning to address what I can only describe as a very unpleasant smell." Jesus. Marina's celebration had turned into a full-blown house party from hell. "How much are we talking for damages?" "At least $800, possibly more, depending on whether the floor can be refinished or needs to be replaced. The lease clearly states that tenants are responsible for damages beyond normal wear and tear." While we were talking, I got a text notification, and I glanced down at my phone out of habit. It was a screenshot from someone I didn't recognize. Looked like a Facebook marketplace listing for my Fluke multimeter, the expensive one I used for commercial jobs. Marina had listed it for sale 3 hours ago, describing it as electronic equipment left behind by ex-roommate. Ex-roommate, not ex-husband, not estranged spouse, but ex-roommate. Like our 5-year marriage was just some casual living arrangement that had run its course. And she was still selling my stuff even after I'd been back to the apartment and documented everything for the police report. "Mr. Patel," I said, trying to keep the anger out of my voice, "I'd like to discuss taking over the lease. Marina has been selling my personal property without permission, and I think it's best if we handle this separation cleanly. How do we make that happen?" "I will need to speak with Marina first. If she agrees to be removed from the lease, we can draw up new paperwork. But Lucas, I must tell you, if these kinds of disturbances continue, I will have no choice but to begin eviction proceedings. My other tenants have rights too." "Understood. And Mr. Patel, I want to be clear that I take full responsibility for the damages from last night, even though I wasn't there. I'll cover the repair costs and the cleaning. I just want this handled properly. You are a good man, Lucas. I will call Marina today and discuss the lease situation. But I suggest you document everything. The property damage, the missing items, all of it. These situations can get very complicated very quickly." After I hung up, I sat in Marcus's kitchen staring at my phone. Another text had come in with more screenshots. Marina had posted my cordless impact driver, my voltage tester, and my good headlamp on various selling platforms. She was liquidating my entire professional toolkit piece by piece, probably to pay for last night's damage and whatever other bills she'd racked up. I started making a list of everything I'd seen posted online, taking screenshots of the listings, and noting the prices she was asking. Most of it was way below market value, like she just wanted to get rid of the stuff as quickly as possible. My impact driver that cost me $300 was listed for $75. My voltage tester posted for $40 when it was worth at least $200. This wasn't just theft. This was vindictive destruction of my ability to make a living. And now she was trying to kick me out of my own apartment on top of it. I needed to get the rest of my stuff out before Marina could sell it or accidentally throw it away. So I drove back to the apartment complex one more time. This was it, the final cleanup. The last time I'd have to deal with that place and all the toxic memories it held. I'd already called ahead and left a message on the apartment voicemail letting Marina know I'd be coming by just to keep things legal and above board. The last thing I needed was her claiming I was trespassing or some other drama. Marcus had let me borrow his truck since mine was already loaded down with boxes, and I was grateful for the extra space. There were still some important things I couldn't afford to lose. My motorcycle repair manuals, my collection of vintage bike parts that were worth more than most people realized, and my dad's old tool chest that had sentimental value, even if it wasn't worth much money. I was loading the last box of motorcycle magazines into the back of Marcus's pickup when I heard the familiar sound of Marina's Honda Civic pulling into the parking lot. She'd probably gotten off work early to catch me there, maybe hoping for some kind of dramatic confrontation that would make me look like the bad guy. I kept loading boxes, trying to stay focused on the task at hand instead of the knot forming in my stomach. "What the hell are you doing?" Marina's voice cut through the afternoon air like a rusty knife. She was practically running across the parking lot, her high heels clicking against the asphalt in that frantic way that meant she was pissed off and trying to maintain some dignity at the same time. "Removing my property before you sell more of it," I said without looking up from the truck bed. I was rearranging boxes to make everything fit, taking my time because I knew it would annoy her. Marina hates being ignored, especially when she's trying to start an argument. "You can't just take everything," she snapped, stopping right next to the truck. "Some of that stuff is ours, not just yours. We bought things together, Lucas." I finally looked at her, really looked at her, and it was weird how different she seemed. Same person, same face, same expensive outfit she probably charged to one of our credit cards. But something had changed. Maybe it was me who changed. "Marina, I documented everything I'm taking. It's all stuff that was mine before we got married or stuff I bought with my own money. I'm not taking anything that belongs to both of us. I needed money," she said. And for a second her voice got smaller, less aggressive. "You left me with bills, Lucas. The dinner, the damages to the apartment, my credit card payments. What was I supposed to do?" "You told me to leave," I said, closing the tailgate with more force than necessary. "I just took your advice." I started walking toward the apartment building to get the dolly I'd borrowed from Marcus. But Marina followed me. That was different. That was just, I was upset. I didn't mean for you to actually leave permanently. She was walking fast to keep up with me, those heels making her wobble a little on the uneven pavement. "We can work this out, Lucas. Couples fight. It doesn't mean we throw away 5 years of marriage." 5 years of marriage. Funny how she brought that up now after spending God knows how long letting her friends treat those 5 years like they were some kind of joke. "Marina, this isn't about one fight. This is about you sitting there smiling while your friends tore me apart. This is about you selling my tools without asking. This is about you telling the landlord I abandoned my responsibilities when you're the one who trashed the apartment." That's when Celeste showed up, because of course she did. Marina must have called for backup the second she saw my truck in the parking lot. Celeste climbed out of her overpriced BMW, wearing sunglasses that probably cost more than most people's rent, looking like she was auditioning for a reality show about awful people. "Wow," Celeste said, crossing her arms and striking a pose like she was posing for Instagram. The handyman's really throwing away his marriage over a joke. She had this smirk on her face, the same one she'd worn at dinner when she was making cracks about my basic job. I didn't even respond to her. Didn't give her the satisfaction of getting a rise out of me or starting some dramatic scene she could probably live stream to her followers. Instead, I just kept loading my stuff, treating her like she was part of the scenery. That seemed to piss her off more than any comeback I could have come up with. "Lucas, please," Marina said. And now she was starting to sound desperate. "Can we just talk about this like adults?" Without all this drama, I closed the truck door and turned to face both of them. Marina looked frantic, her perfect makeup starting to run a little in the afternoon heat. Celeste looked annoyed that I wasn't playing along with whatever show she was trying to put on. And me? I felt calmer than I had in months. "I'm done, Marina," I said. My voice was steady as a rock. I'm done being the punchline. I'm done paying to be disrespected. I'm done pretending this is something it's not. You're really going to walk away from everything we built together? Marina asked. And she actually sounded hurt, like she couldn't understand how we'd gotten to this point. We didn't build anything together. I told her, you built a life where I was the supporting character in your story, where I was the guy who paid the bills and fixed things and stayed quiet while your friends made jokes about what a loser you, married. That's not a marriage, Marina. That's a business arrangement, and I'm terminating the contract. Marina started crying then. The kind of crying that's probably genuine, but also calculated to make the other person feel guilty. 5 years, Lucas. 5 years. And you're just going to throw it all away? I'm not throwing anything away, I said, getting into the driver's seat of Marcus's truck. I'm just finally picking up something I should have grabbed a long time ago. What's that? She asked through her tears. My self-respect. I drove away without looking back, leaving Marina standing in that parking lot with her toxic friend and her crocodile tears. For the first time in years, I felt like I was driving towards something instead of running away from it. The next few days were like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion, and I had front row seats to the whole damn show. It started with a call from Mr. Patel 3 days after my final confrontation with Marina in the parking lot. Lucas, my friend, he said, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. I have served Marina with a cure or quit notice. She has 14 days to remedy the lease violations and pay for damages, or she must vacate the premises. Apparently, Marina had tried everything to avoid taking responsibility. She'd claimed the damage was pre-existing, that the noise complaints were from vindictive neighbors, that I was the one who should be paying for everything since I was technically still on the lease. But Mr. Patel had been in property management for 15 years, and he'd seen every excuse in the book. She also tried to convince me that you had verbally agreed to cover all costs, he continued. When I asked for this agreement in writing, she became very, difficult. I could imagine Marina getting difficult usually involved a lot of raised voices, demands to speak to supervisors, and threats about lawyers that never materialized. What did you tell her? I told her that lease violations are the responsibility of all parties on the lease. And since she was the one present during the incident, she would need to take care of it. She tried to stall, asking for extensions, payment plans. But I have other tenants to consider. Marina had no choice but to agree to leave. Without me splitting the rent and utilities, she couldn't afford the place anyway, especially not with the added cost of repairs and cleaning. Mr. Patel offered to let me take over the lease solo. But honestly, I didn't want the apartment anymore. Too many bad memories. Too much toxic energy soaked into the walls. I told him to just terminate the whole thing, and we'd call it, even if he could keep my security deposit to cover part of the damages. But the real drama was happening with Marina's friend group, and I was getting updates through Omar, who'd become my unofficial intelligence source. Turns out the night I walked out had been the beginning of the end for their whole toxic crew. Omar had finally grown a backbone and dumped Harley after he found their group chat on her phone. Dude, he texted me, you should see some of the stuff they wrote about us. Harley called me a placeholder until someone better comes along and said she was only dating me for the free dinners and concert tickets. Celeste got fired from her marketing job after HR found out she'd been using the company group chat to trash-talk coworkers the same way she'd been trash-talking me for years. Apparently, one of her colleagues had screenshots of her calling the office manager a fat cow who peaked in high school and making jokes about a client's accent. Corporate America might put up with a lot of nonsense, but they draw the line at liability issues. Tara's boyfriend, Mike, found out about the group chat too. And he didn't take it well when he discovered she'd been calling him boring and complaining about his cheap dates to her friends. He broke up with her via text message, which was probably more consideration than she deserved, and moved out of their shared apartment that weekend, without boyfriends to help split bills and cover their expensive lifestyles. The whole crew was struggling financially. Celeste couldn't afford her rent without her job and had to move back in with her parents at 32. Tara was couch surfing with various acquaintances, burning through friendships as fast as she'd burned through her relationship. And Harley was working at a coffee shop and posting passive-aggressive quotes about fake friends on social media. The best part was watching them turn on each other. Without a common target like me to unite them, they started using their mean girl tactics on each other. Harley blamed Celeste for ruining the group dynamic by getting fired. Celeste blamed Tara for being too obvious about her gold digging. Tara blamed Marina for starting all this drama by not keeping her husband in line. Marina was stuck in the middle of it all, suddenly realizing that loyalty was a one-way street with these women. When she needed help moving out of the apartment, none of them were available. When she needed someone to listen to her sob-ab story about her marriage falling apart, they were too busy dealing with their own relationship disasters. The friend group that had seemed so tight, so unbreakable, crumbled faster than a stale cookie. Meanwhile, I was starting to rebuild my life piece by piece, and it felt damn good. Life without Marina and her toxic circus was like finally getting a good night's sleep after months of insomnia. I found a quiet one-bedroom apartment in Riverside, about 10 minutes closer to my main job sites, and the difference was incredible. The rent was $300 less than what I'd been paying for my half of the old place. The neighbors were normal people who said hello in the hallways, and nobody was throwing wine-fueled parties that ended with police visits. The apartment was simple, but clean. Hardwood floors that didn't have wine stains, a kitchen that actually got used for cooking instead of storing takeout containers, and a living room where I could watch whatever I wanted on TV without getting lectured about my basic taste in entertainment. No more home design shows, no more reality TV about rich housewives fighting over nothing. Just Sports Center and old movies that didn't require me to care about which celebrity was dating which other celebrity. Most evenings, I'd head over to Marcus's garage to work on the Kawasaki. I'd managed to track down the guy who bought it from Marina's Craigslist ad. And after explaining the situation, he was decent enough to sell it back to me for what he'd paid. Turned out he was a mechanic himself and understood how much it would suck to lose a restoration project he'd put years into. Good people still existed, apparently. Working on the bike was therapeutic in a way I'd forgotten about. Getting my hands dirty, solving mechanical problems, bringing something broken back to life. It reminded me why I'd fallen in love with fixing things in the first place. No drama, no attitude. Just the honest satisfaction of making something work better than it did before. I'd been picking up extra electrical jobs on weekends, slowly rebuilding my tool collection with the insurance payout from my theft claim. The police report had actually helped more than I'd expected. Having official documentation made the insurance company take my claims seriously, and I was able to replace most of my professional equipment. Within a couple months, Omar and I had started hanging out regularly, grabbing beers after work and talking about everything except our ex-girlfriends. Turned out we had a lot in common beyond just dating women who didn't respect us. He was into motorcycles too. Had a Yamaha he'd been thinking about restoring, and we'd spend hours in Marcus's garage just working on our bikes and shooting the hump about normal guy stuff. You know what's weird? Omar said one Friday night, passing me a wrench while I adjusted the Kawasaki's carburetors. I feel like I can breathe again. Like I didn't realize how much energy I was spending trying to keep Harley. I knew exactly what he meant. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells or planning my day around someone else's mood swings. I wasn't getting lectured about my hobbies or my friends or my job. I was just living my life, making my own choices, being myself without having to apologize for it. My mom called me the following Sunday like she did every week. And halfway through our conversation, she stopped mid-sentence. "You sound different, Lucas," she said. "Lighter, happier, like you're actually enjoying your life again." She was right. For the first time in a long time, I was. 6 months after I walked out of Romano's steakhouse, Marina sent me a text that I'd been half expecting and half dreading. It came on a Tuesday morning while I was having coffee and getting ready for work. Just a simple message that probably took her hours to write. I should have defended you. I'm sorry. Can we try again? I stared at that text for a long time, reading it over and over while my coffee got cold. Part of me, the part that remembered the good times from early in our relationship before her friends became such a big influence, felt something. Maybe it was nostalgia. Maybe it was leftover love. Or maybe it was just the human instinct to want closure from someone who'd been such a big part of my life. But you know what I did? Nothing. I deleted the message and went to work. Because here's the thing. Sorry doesn't fix 5 years of letting people treat your husband like garbage. Sorry doesn't give me back the tools she sold or the self-respect I lost sitting at that dinner table. Sorry doesn't change the fact that when push came to shove, she chose her toxic friends over her marriage every single time. The aftermath of our split had been exactly what you'd expect. Marina moved back in with her mother in New Jersey, a 45-year-old woman sleeping in her childhood bedroom because she'd never learned how to live within her means. Her friend group had completely imploded. Celeste was still living with her parents and working retail. Tara was dating some guy she met on a dating app who didn't know about her gold-digging history yet. And Harley was posting inspirational quotes about new beginnings while serving lattes to college kids. They blamed Marina for everything. Of course, in their twisted logic, if she'd just kept me in line better, none of their drama would have happened. If she'd been a better wife, I wouldn't have overreacted to their harmless jokes. If she'd handled the situation differently, they'd all still be living their fantasy lives where consequences didn't exist. Meanwhile, I was thriving. The Kawasaki was running like a dream, hurrying through the streets like the classic beauty she was meant to be. My tool collection was better than ever, and I'd built up a solid base of repeat customers who appreciated quality work and fair prices. Omar and I had become genuine friends. The kind who show up when you need help moving or just want to grab a beer and watch the game. My mom was right. I did sound lighter. Hell, I felt lighter. Like I'd been carrying around a backpack full of rocks for years and finally figured out I could just set it down and walk away. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't fighting back or making a big dramatic gesture. Sometimes it's just walking away from people who don't value what you bring to their lives. Marina and her crew thought I'd come crawling back, checkbook in hand, ready to apologize for having the nerve to expect basic respect. Instead, they're the ones paying the price for treating people like disposable entertainment. And me, I'm living my best life, one day at a time, surrounded by people who actually give a damn about me as a human being instead of a walking ATM. Turns out the joke was on them all along.